And to be quite honest, it wasn't a great experience. I don't think I can get sued about this. I'm on about. I just said I'm done. I can't work in an environment that no one cares about these people.
Today we have somebody very special on the DRN podcast, Simon Saucy, somebody that you probably don't see very often on the track as far as a pilot, but has some roots really deep in the drone racing world. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's been a long time in the making. I'm finally glad we're able to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I met Simon at DRL race at the beginning of this year, beginning of 2024. And since then, we have become close, and I ask all of my technical questions to you because you are one of the smartest people in drone racing or drones in general that I know. And you're always like behind the scenes. I want to hear a little bit about where you come from in drones, but additionally, what you plan on doing in the future, and then also just a little bit of that in between, what you're up to right now and where you've come from. But first, I want to know, how did you get started in the world of drones, and tell me about your kind of journey.
Yeah, well, I'll have to take you back to 2013 when drones were made out of balsa wood. Yeah, I think balsa wood. And you did all the programming on the drone itself. Betaflight didn't exist. I remember I saw my brother got into them, and I was like, oh my gosh, those are so cool. I need to get into them. And just, kind of watched it progress when Hobby King was a thing, and that was where you bought everything. Built my first drone when I was probably 7 or 8, and then promptly crashed it and broke it. And the cycle continued, and it continues to this day. But yeah, I mean, I've done drones for almost 10 years now. Like, again, from when they were balsa wood to now, mainly in like the freestyle racing realm. And then the last few years gotten a lot more into the long range. And then more recently into the actual production and logistics behind holding drone races. Yeah,
that's long before myself, or obviously probably many viewers have gotten into drones. But when the first created, balsa wood drone is like such a foreign concept to me. That's so funny.
It's crazy. I wish I still had one. There is one somewhere in my hometown in some forest that flew off, and I never found it. So if you know where I live, you can go find that.
I love that. Well, we won't dox you on this podcast. So you were into drones like very beginning. You got into building, things like that. You're more on the technical side. And then you mentioned you got into kind of more recently into how the logistics work of putting on a drone race. There's a video, I forget who it's by, I want to say Wendover Productions, that was done like a year or two ago on the logistics behind F1 races. Mm-hmm. And I watched that, and it blew my mind how much these people have to like set up, tear down cameras, all of the cables, all the data, all of the information being passed around to broadcast this incredible event. And I'm assuming on a bit of a smaller scale, but similarly, drone races are very similar to that. And I'm curious, from your perspective, logistically, just talk a little bit about what it takes to throw a drone race.
Yeah, I mean, like, even from the small multi-GP chapter races, there is so much that goes into it. I mean, the chapter organizers put such a huge effort into putting on races. From designing the track. I mean, there's a whole separate art. You've talked to many people about designing tracks. That's a whole art in and of itself of designing a good track. And then the technology, live time that goes into the timing of the drones and making sure we get accurate lap times, to then the whole other side of broadcasting and filming them, of what many companies are starting to do now. It's at such a scale that it's almost the same as like an NFL game. I mean, I know when I've been on site with DRL, it's said over and over again, like, this is the biggest production any of us have ever done. And those are people that work at NFL and NBC and do all these huge productions. And putting on a drone race is just something completely unfathomable because of how much technology it does to put on it. I mean, you have 8 drones up at a time, right? And you have to have control over them. You have to have clean video for the pilots. You have to have timing. Sometimes you're timing between gates. Then you have the whole logistics of filming. You have to communicate if there's an issue. You have to land. There's so many technical things that go into it that it's, on the surface, it looks so simple. Then you dive into it and it's like, whoa, that's a lot.
That's something that I think, to DRL's credit, in my opinion, it's a lot easier to watch. And I've showed friends DRL races and they can get on board. And then I've shown friends races from other leagues and they're completely lost. And I'm lost half the time, and I'm like a huge drone racing fan.
Yep.
So it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting the spectating side, like you said, is so hard. Like, it's harder than being a pilot. It's harder than the technical side. Shout out to all the pilots out there. It's a hard job. But like, seriously, it's so hard to nail the spectating side, because you have to think about every single sense that person is experiencing and how to make it palatable for them. It's like what baseball and football do so well, right? Is it's a complicated game. I don't really watch a ton of football, but I can sit down and I can watch a football game and I can understand what's going on. And I think that's the goal for drone racing, is that anyone can sit down and understand, here's what's happening. Here are the people that are flying. Here's the place they're in. Here's what they're competing for and what the end goal is. And quite frankly, it's hard to do on a budget. It's hard to do if you don't have broadcast experience, and it's hard to do in the middle of a field.
Yeah.
Like, everything drone racing works against the experience for a viewer, because those are all things you wouldn't normally have to worry about that are now barriers for people. But needless to say, it can be done, right? We've seen DRL do it. We've seen F1 do it. Many people do it. So it can be done. Are we willing? I think for a good viewer experience, you have to sacrifice some of the pilot experience. Like, as you've interviewed people, I know DRL does a great job, but they're not perfect with the pilot experience, right? There are things pilots don't like with anything. Pilots are very picky, myself included. So to get a good pilot experience, you have to sacrifice the spectator experience. But to get a good spectator experience, you have to sacrifice a little bit of the pilot experience. So you have to find that happy medium where both parties are happy.
Yeah, and also keep the people watching, the spectators, safe. I mean, these things are flying around at upwards of 100 miles an hour, and they're not like shaped like a baseball. I mean, a baseball would hurt anyway, but like these are like razor blades flying through the sky at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I flew a drone into my back a few times, and it landed square on my back, and it hurt. And that was at like 5 miles an hour. So I can't imagine what a 75-mile-an-hour drone, 8-inch, would feel like.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to talk more about like the nitty gritty of those logistics. First off, like, how did you get involved, and like, did you get a phone call? How did they know that you knew what you were doing? Like, where did your involvement kind of come into play and all that? Specifically for DRL is kind of what I have in mind, but just in general, I guess. Yeah,
I think I first started getting involved in DRL probably 2018 when the simulator tryouts started to take off. It was easy way to practice, easy way to have fun. I was like, I want to be on a TV show. That sounds fun. So I participated in the tryouts for a few years, and got really involved in the community, the Discord community. And it just kind of grew from there. I would be at every single Discord race. Every time there was someone in a chat, I'd be there. I took on some like Discord moderator responsibilities, helping people with new drones. Building a drone, there are so many things that come with it. Getting it to connect to a computer is somehow so hard and never works. So I built up a good rapport with some of the main people at DRL, Tony Niddle and FP Vegan, and just really grew that relationship. And then when I moved across the country to Las Vegas, DRL had a race in Las Vegas in 2022. And I had mentioned, I was like, I will do anything. I just want to be at the race. And I got a call from one of the race ops people, and they're like, we'd love to have you out. And I started out as a production assistant, rolling cable and doing any little task, getting dinner, whatever it was. I was just so excited to be there and work for this amazing company that I had been a part of on a different scale for so long. And then to like be brought inside was so cool. And it's just ballooned from there. It snowballed. I'm now a drone runner and help with production and planning for upcoming races. It's been a really cool journey to get here.
So you get involved in this Las Vegas race, which 2018, the simulator tournament, was that Fluxy who won that year?
I believe so. And that was, ironically enough, in Las Vegas before I lived there, but it was in Las Vegas, I believe.
Oh, gotcha. Did you get to go to the finals?
I did not. No, I think I watched them online. That was like, just as I started to get involved with it. But I remember watching that. I was definitely hooked because I think that was the first mean, obviously we've had other TV shows with drone races, but on like a simulator side, I think that was the first live game type performance that DRL's ever done or anyone's ever done. So it had a lot of eyes on it. It was really cool to watch.
Absolutely. And if any of the viewers want to know a little bit more about the DRL simulator, I do have a video over on the Mad Props channel. I can link that down in the description, or if I can put it up there, I'll throw that up right there as well. And that just tells you a little bit more about what the history is and logistics that goes into to the simulator race, which is fascinating. I mean, people from all over the world are trying out to get a spot on the roster in the DRL, and pilots get to actually land some pretty big contracts just from racing in this essentially video game.
Right. Yeah, you can go from racing in your home to literally on a national stage on national TV in the course of a few months, which is absolutely unheard of, right? Like you don't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, and I think that you've seen some really cool stories that come from that. Amari has done amazing jobs. Yep. Halo Walker, and then this year, Chris M. as well, I have some confidence in. Have you looked at the roster for this year?
I got to see it a few weeks ago, and I was pleasantly surprised to see everyone on it, and I am very much looking forward to Miami again this spring because... I mean, you have some of the biggest multi-GP names, some of the biggest returning DRL names, some of the biggest all-time names in there, and to put them all on a stage with a spec drone that each fly identical is going to be absolutely amazing to watch.
Yeah,
like there is,
yeah, it is.
It's going to be such a tight pack. I don't think we've ever seen racing like it's going to be.
I agree. And just, I mean, I'm not saying you have to call favorites or anything like that, but you have more experience in watching these drone races than the average viewer. From your experience, who's got this one? Who's coming out on top? Like, where do you think people are going to end up in the ranking?
You know, Evan Turner's he's up there. That's for sure. MCK, returning champion. We'll see. I think it's going to come down to who can master the style of flying the Racer 4 the best, because all of these pilots are great in their own right. They're great at 5-inch, but who can translate that to 7-inch is going to be huge, which I think we've already started to see a lot with MultiGP's Pro Spec and what they did at IO to kind of see how that translates. But I think it's going to come down to who can fly the Racer 4 the best and get the tightest line.
Now, I 100% agree, and I think it's interesting to see MCK last season of the DRL started off pretty rocky. Like he really didn't do a great job at the beginning of the season, and then he locked in, especially in the last 3 races. But it's not really a spec that people fly day in and day out often. And so being able to have a full season under your belt, or 2 for some of these pilots, or like Alex has had 4 or 5, it's going to be a huge advantage.
Yeah, I'm excited. We have Alex returning, Amari's there, Halo Walker, like every single big drone racing name you can think of in modern day is on this list, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So you'll be there, I assume. Are you helping out to any capacity?
I believe I'm going to be on the race ops team. So.
That's so cool. This is my second shout out on this channel. I have yet to be invited to this event. If the right person sees this, you know who you are. I would love to be there. But
Laura,
regardless, yeah, I guess you would be one of the people that have the connections. What we can do. But yeah, all right. Appreciate that. Regardless, so putting on one of these events is really insane. And you mentioned as well doing something for even MultiGP and some of the chapter owners. Have you hosted any other events besides DRL?
So personally, I haven't hosted any MultiGP ones, been a part of a lot. I got to help out at IO this year with ProSpec. I did do a short stint in MLDR as a production manager for them, which we can get into. Very fun experience, very interesting experience. But like any place there has been drone racing, I've tried to be a part of as much as I can. I love it so much. Just the thrill it brings. You put down the goggles and that's the only thing you have to worry about. Worries of life, everything else go away, and you have to block out everything else and only worry about drone racing, which is so cool, and that's why I love it so much.
MLDR, for those of you viewing who don't know, is Major League Drone Racing. It was started by a gentleman named Richard Tulloch a couple years ago, and it kind of took correct me if I'm wrong here, as an approach that was more like cities had their own teams, more like a major league American sport. And so there was like the Phoenix whatever and the Dallas whatever, and then they would match up, and pilots didn't necessarily have to be from there, but it was a team that was supposed to represent a city. And then they'd go all around and race those as well. To my knowledge, they've only put on 1 or 2 events ever, and I'm not even sure if they're still trying to do stuff.
Yeah, they started back in like 2020-ish and through COVID. The approach was definitely like, think baseball, MLB, obviously teams for each city, and they come together, and I think it was 12 races in a year, and that would lead up to a championship. The idea was to take a sporting concept that's already existed and just transfer it to drone racing. So it's team-based. So, you might have 10 players or 10 pilots, and you only have spots for 6. So you kind of get to switch out a little bit. All the equipment was provided by MLDR. So they were spec drones, spec courses, and all the pilots had to do was race essentially. So very similar to what DRL was doing, but on a team basis. Yeah, I think they put on 2 or 3 events. I did 2 events when I was with them. And I think they have an event coming up this fall. I'm not sure. I know they had some financial troubles, but I think they're making a comeback. It was a cool opportunity for a lot of pilots that maybe weren't like the best of the best, right? That were still good pilots, weren't the best of the best, to have an opportunity to get into drone racing and be seen on a stage. And I think it just gave people an opportunity to show their piloting skills at a greater level than, at your local multi-GP chapter.
Yeah, financial problems seems to be a reoccurring theme in drone racing in general.
Yes.
This is not just MLDR. Which is understandable. I mean, you're trying to do something on a large scale, starting from zero, and build some hype around it when it's still a pretty niche audience. You think of when MLB was just starting, or when F1 was just starting, in some of these sports back then, I don't even think the players made any money. I'm assuming it was like all on a voluntary basis, or at the very least, extremely small contracts and not a lot of money for uniforms and all those things. And so to be able to pull off something like this is still a very impressive feat, even if it is just a couple races.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into it. Like even a MLDR, it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars per event. And that was all privately funded from investors. And it's a lot, right? You're renting a stage, you're renting lights, not to mention the tens and $20,000-$30,000 that put into the equipment, the drones, the staffing. You're there for 2 or 3 days for an MLDR event, plus travel, all these things that are just such a core part of events you can't get rid of are there even with MLDR. And it was cool to see like a separate approach to it that DRL hadn't really done. So yeah, MLDR is a spec racing league. So they fly 7-inch drones. They're a little slower than your typical like DRL or multi-GP drone. And they have throttle caps on them. So throttle cap is essentially, if you think of throttle from 0 to 100, a cap is saying the throttle can only go from 0 to 80%. So it's kind of taking off the top end of that, where what like multi-GP and some other leagues use is an RPM limiter, which actually takes the full stator size of the motor and essentially shrinks it down. And instead of just cutting off the top 20%, it over the course of that 80%, it transforms it. Tim, who does Street League, is a great person to talk to about this because he's absolutely brilliant with it, and he can explain it a lot better than me. But throttle cap, you're capping off the top of the throttle, so you can only go so fast. But in turn, it affects how your drone handles, because now instead of having 0 to 100, you only have 0 to 80. So your throttle is going to be higher, like where you're hovering, and it's going to handle different in corners. So it's a whole different style of flying than if you don't have a throttle cap. Like it affects a lot of things. I know some people use throttle caps for freestyle. I've used them occasionally for long range to just kind of control how much throttle you're using and how fast your drone can go to get more fine-tuned control over it.
I'll use throttle caps for any kind of indoor flight that I do, just because if I don't, I will hit the ceiling in like 2 seconds. And even on like not very powerful drones, I gotta put a throttle cap on there for indoor flight.
Yep.
So you get involved a little bit in MLDR, and You and I have talked about this offline before, but I'm curious, just like, can you explain a little bit more of your overall experience, but the races especially, what happened there?
Yeah, so I was brought on when there was some departures from staff to kind of take over like an event manager type role. So think logistics of putting on an event, the production side of putting on an event, anything that it would take to put on an event in a stadium that kind of fell under me. It's not something that I'm new to doing. That's what I do in my day job. So like it's very familiar for me. And I was brought on a few months before the event we had in Phoenix. Honestly, can't remember which stadium it was. It was the one before Peoria, the other side of town. And our goal with this event, it was going to be one of the first events with a live audience that we were originally going to live broadcast. So we wanted a pilot stage, we wanted a full LED track, and we wanted to broadcast it and just really make a good experience, kind of more as a show to the investors and people that were giving money for it. So it's something I'm familiar with. I'm like, yeah, this is easy. And we just kind of walked through the process of doing it. And throughout the probably 6 months of planning the event just kept getting stripped back a little by little by little by little to us down to its very core, which was we need to test the drones and make sure they work and test this theory of how the pilots are going to fly and the format. That was the big thing. It's like, we haven't used this format before, so we need to test the format. And with that, we're only going to get on the production side what's absolutely necessary to put on the event. So the event was really only aimed at spectators in the stadium. And to be quite honest, it wasn't a great experience for spectators, which we can get into. But as far as like the success of the event, I think from a technical side, it was really successful. It showed the people who are doing the drones and building them and handling that side of the race, what worked, what didn't work. As far as the drones, they worked great. The track looked awesome. The reaction from the pilots was, it was fun. Again, for a lot of the pilots, it was their first time on a stage like that in front of people that weren't drone fans. We didn't fill the stadium, but I think there were a few hundred people there. Overall, it was a good event, but it really got stripped down to a test of concept, proof of concept, rather than an actual event.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. But I'm curious, when you say the viewers didn't have the best experience, can you break that down a little bit more?
Yeah. So you think of like a normal sporting event, right? As a viewer, there's a few things that come to mind for me when I think of it. So it's like, visually, what am I looking at? What am I seeing? So maybe that's what's on the field and what's on the screens. And then second is, what am I hearing? Because like, obviously we're doing a podcast right now. So podcast audio is really important, right?
Right.
There needs to be commentators, color commentators are commenting the actual race, people that are filling the 5 or 10 minutes between the races. Because without that, is really boring. And for a normal person, they can't figure out what's going on, right? You see these lights moving around on field and a bunch of pilots screaming. And you're like, oh, that's cool. What's happening?
Right.
And so for the event, we didn't really have anything like video screen wise. So there was no like statistics about the pilot, who this pilot is, intros, things like that. We did have, obviously, you could see the whole track, and it was at night. And the drones have 100 plus LEDs on them. So they're very bright and they're slow. So you can see them, right? So you can see the track. You can see how the pilots are flying. That part of it was great, I think. But the commentating part was kind of overlooked. So we were able to get someone to come in and commentate. And for what he did an amazing job. He did the best he could. And that's all that we could ask. But there's just a lot missing. The race was commentated, but nothing really in between. So you have like 10 minutes of people pulling out their phones. Because as soon as they pull out their phone from like a production standpoint, we've lost an audience member, right? Then now it's going to take them longer to get re-engaged and reconnect with what's happening. So when they were disconnecting, they might not have been connected for the next race. And that kind of just progressed and added up over all the races to where we got to the end where a lot of people left. Maybe didn't stay all the way to the end. And some people were pretty happy, but the sense I got where people were like, this is cool, but I have no idea what I just watched.
That's tough, because then it's like it kind of has a reflection and a taste in their mouth over all of drone races. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's tough about that, which I know that it takes a lot more planning and connections and things like that to in order to fill in those spots, but also the time in between races is usually a good time for sponsorship deals or ways that you can kind of make up for the cost of throwing the event. I know I have a small cousin who loves the ketchup, mustard, onion, or mayo, or whatever it is, races in between innings at the baseball games.
It's amazing.
And yeah, they'll go to games just to cheer for mustard or whatever. I don't remember what who their condiment of choice is, but regardless, those are moments that you can be a little bit creative and try to make entertaining while still like filling in that time. Do you think that you will join them at all in the future? Do you think your time with them is over? Like, talk to me about where you see yourself with MLDR.
I will say this. I think with the current leadership at MLDR, I will not be going back. I didn't leave on great terms. Had very much of a falling out. I'll give a little insight into it. I think that's okay to share, right? I don't think I can get sued about this. I'll maintain anonymity for everyone, so no one gets mad.
I'll bleep out the names, whatever. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, as I worked at MLDR, I oversaw a lot of events, and I worked very closely with a lot of the core team. Not really investors, but mainly Richard himself and a few other core people that made MLDR what it was. And for the most part, those relationships were really good. But with any company, when you work with someone for so long, you butt heads. And I think one of the things that has plagued the drone racing community from the very beginning is paying people and paying them on time and paying them what they're worth. Like, you look at any league, there's some lawsuit, there's someone who's not happy about it that didn't get paid properly. I don't understand it, but no one in drone racing can seem to figure it out. There's very few leagues, DRL, DHL, a few that do it well, but for the most part, it's an issue for every single league, and that was an issue for MLDR. There was times where I'm owed about... I probably should cut that out. I'm going to say I'm owed a lot of money. I'm owed a very sizable chunk of money that I've just decided to walk away from because it's not worth the effort to go after it. A lot of hours. What really forced me to leave is during the last event, it kept getting cut down. And we had booked staff that had the way the contractors worked with MLDRs, they paid for their travel and then we reimbursed it after the fact. And so they paid for their travel, they booked their hotels, they booked their planes, and then I was told that I need to cancel them because we're canceling that part of the race. And a standard thing in the production world is if you cancel outside of about 2 or 3 days, you either pay the person or you at least compensate them for what they would have lost, like some normal compensation. And none of that was given. And that, as a production manager, that really made me mad because I knew that, okay, I might not getting paid. I'll be fine, right? If I don't get paid, I'm going to be okay. This is a side hustle. But for these people, this is a lot of their job that I just took away a week's worth of work, a week's worth of pay from them and cost them money. And I can't do anything about it. It's not that I didn't want to. It's like I couldn't. Like, I tried. And to just see that no one gave a crap about them. No one cared. And I just said, I'm done. I can't work in an environment that no one cares about these people. And a lot of the people were my friends, right? I brought friends into this because I was excited about it and people I trusted. And to tell them they're not going to get paid and now they have to try to get a refund for their plane tickets and rental cars is not okay. And I saw that even for the pilots. There's pilots that haven't got paid, that they were guaranteed money and they did not get that money. Their contracts were funky, very weird contracts, and they weren't getting paid what they were owed. Staff wasn't getting paid what they were owed. And it spiraled out of control to a point where I didn't want to be a part of it. And breaking away was not easy because I was so heavily involved in it that I had a lot of MLDR property that I had to give back and just figure out that whole exchange. And I was accused of a lot of things I didn't do. When something like that goes public, there's people who don't like you and they will drag you through the mud for whatever they can. And no matter how small or how big, if it makes them look better, they will do it. And I had to go through a lot of that. And that wasn't something I signed up for. That's not something anyone should sign up for. And I don't know why those are all issues in drone racing. Like, maybe it's because it's a new industry. Maybe those issues exist in the tech industry as well. But yeah, that was some of the things. I don't hold anything against a lot of the people at MRDR anymore. There are people I don't like. There are people I will not work for in the future. But a lot of the people there are good. They're good people. They want the best for people. They were just under leadership that was bad and didn't care. And they were put in a position where they had to do whatever they could to survive. And it was every man for themselves.
Were you put into the position where you had to have those specific conversations telling people to cancel their planes and hotels and everything? That was like fell under you.
Yep.
Oh, that's so hard.
There's designers I couldn't pay. It's like they did work and they were waiting on their paycheck. And I was like,
yeah,
I can't do anything. The best I can offer you is you go to small claims court. But, you know, MLDR is lawyers and it's not going to be worth your money.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, it just sucks because it really hurts the whole drone industry.
Yeah.
It makes pilots demotivated. It makes people who are really talented at designing, at lighting and all these things extremely demotivated to work for other leagues or to be passionate about the sport at all.
Yeah. It paints such a bad name for the drone community. I think MLDR was lucky that it didn't blow up bigger than it did. Because I think for the majority, it stayed within the community, the FPV community. They really didn't get out. That most people have heard of MLDR. Some people were involved. They know some of the fallout, but it didn't like make it onto national news or anything, right? If this were to happen at F1, it would be everywhere, and those people's careers would be ruined.
Yeah.
Like, and the fact is, it wasn't a lot of these people's issues that were involved. It was leadership's issue. They set a bad precedent, and these people got pulled into it. And I just feel so bad for them because some of them are still there because they need the money. And some of them, a few of them's career, they'll never work for drone racing again because they have such a bad taste in their mouth. And that hurts everyone.
Well, that's never fun. And I'm glad that you are able to reconcile. You're on the other side of things. Just really sucks in general. But yeah, I also think it's tough when it comes to drone racing that there isn't one format that is universal to everything, where like next year they're going to bring baseball to the Olympics and it's going to be the rules of baseball and that will be the same rules as whatever. Whereas the FAI had drone racing on like an Olympic scale, like they had different countries bring drone racers and drone pilots, but the rules for that drone race were completely different from the rules for multi-GP, which are completely different from the rules of street league, which are totally different from DRL, from DCL. And so like asking a viewer to become a fan of one of these race formats or leagues is extremely difficult when they have seen one from another league and either didn't enjoy their experience watching that one, or they got used to that format and now you're asking them to watch something totally different. It's kind of like NASCAR and F1. I get people comparing it to like that a lot, but it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I guess that's probably the best comparison there is. But instead of there being like two major leagues, there's like one and then a bunch of kind of major, but like still major to pilots. But I don't know. You know, it's like, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what it would look like to almost have a governing body over all of drone racing that would have rules for everything. Which, to be quite honest, I don't know if we'll ever get to there. Maybe there's a DRL now that DRL has been bought by Infinite Reality. That DRL is still trying to figure out exactly what their format's going to be moving forward. So maybe there's a day where DRL is again on the national stage, on everyone's TV, and they are the premier league and they're making the rules. And maybe they split out to a team format. Like, who knows what's going to happen? But I think it would be cool to see a more standardized approach to everything, that a viewer can tune on to many different channels. And so there's going to be things that are a little different, right? There's things that are different from the minor league to the major league baseball. There's things that are different from football to the pro league. Like, everything is a little different. But if you could have standardized that people can understand what's going on and certain things are always the same, I think it would really make the viewer experience a lot better. And quite honestly, I think it would boost the popularity of drone racing. Because I've yet to meet a single person that I tell about drone racing and I'm like, that's so cool. Like, no one says that's not cool at all. Like, I don't want to watch that. Right? Like, I've never heard anyone say that.
Right.
But it's just that they have to understand what's going on. It has to be engaging for them. And it's got to be engaging for the advertisers, right? Because if they're not engaged, they're not making money. So it's like this whole ball that has to all work out in the favor to keep it going.
Yeah, I love that idea of there being like an overarching entity that kind of lets the rules be known, and rules can change. Like you talk about
Right. Yeah.
F1, like those rules are changing every year based on the spec, based on the tracks, based on viewership, any kind of reasoning behind the changes, but they can still change every year, and that's okay. It's just that there is some kind of standardization to show that there is a somewhat of a consistent format year over year.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned Infinite Reality.
Yeah.
Which I have yet to really talk about much on the channel. I would love to get somebody from DRL, or I guess now from Infinite Reality, to come on the show and kind of talk about it a little bit more from an internal perspective. But I'm curious, you're like kind of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out perspective. What is your take on the buyout or partnership? I'm not sure what they're officially calling it, but do you think that it was a good move? Do you think that it will have a positive impact on drone racing moving forward? What's your just kind of take from like a top-down perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it happened, I was a little surprised because DRL kind of, without knowing any of the details, they went under a little bit. My impression is maybe they lost a major sponsor, an investor fell through, something like that, and they had to cut back to their core. We didn't see anything from them for a year, and so when they were bought by Infinite Reality, it happened from our perspective, from an outside perspective, like out of the blue, right? Saw an Instagram announcement, I was like, oh, DRL's back. Like, oh my, like this is big.
Right.
And so I think it's a really cool opportunity that DRL has, because now they have a multi-billion-dollar company behind them. They have bigger budgets than they've ever have. They can do bigger things. They have the resources to do big stadium events, and they have the knowledge to do big stadium events, right? They've already done it before. They have the formula mastered. They just didn't have the money to do it. I mean, it's millions of dollars to bring everyone out and to put on a race. Like it is so expensive. I cannot imagine how DRL was making a profit off of the Miami race. Maybe they were. I'm guessing it was TV, right? Like the audience wasn't paying for the race. It was the TV.
Right.
So to see Infinite Reality come in and believe in DRL's vision, and from my understanding, they've really left DRL untouched. Obviously there are changes that are going to be made, right? There's changes that are made, but it seems like a lot of the core people at DRL are still there. They stayed through the layoffs. Some people have been hired back. Obviously, I think there's some internal restructuring, but the core of DRL is the same, and they're still allowed to do what they want to do. And I think having such a big company behind them is going to give them so many more resources that they've never had access to before, that they now have access to, and they can put on those big events and get the big sponsors again and the connections to hopefully get DRL back to where it was and even better. Because I think DRL was on a really good track. Like from an employee perspective, I absolutely loved every single time I worked with DRL. I went home every day and I was like, wow, someone actually cares for me. Which if anyone's worked in the production industry, that is very rare.
Yeah.
You go home feeling like an absolute trash bag.
Yeah.
And I never went home like that from DRL. The staff always cared for you. The leadership invested in you and cared about your perspective. Obviously, there's an event to be done and there's a standard to be held. And if you mess up, there's consequences. But I feel like everything came in stride. And they weren't mad about little mess ups. It was learning opportunities. They took care of us. They fed us. They paid us well. And so when I saw DRL go by, I was like, oh, that's sad. Like I really liked that. But seeing them come back now is like it's a breath of fresh air for them. And I'm really excited to see what the next 2 or 3 years is going to look like, whatever format they choose. I'm excited to see where it goes.
I definitely am skeptical a little bit of Infinite Reality's approach to making everything in the metaverse and trying to get everything be this kind of like digital format. But I will say 2 things. Number one, if they're not innovating, they're going to fall behind super quickly because even NBA, NFL, NBA especially, a lot of big sports brands are doing this in general, but are choosing to put themselves into a very future forward approach where they're trying to experiment with whatever hits, like throw as much at the wall as you can and whatever sticks. And it seems like, and I am maybe way too much of a boomer to be on board for this, but it seems like metaverse reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, could be a big part of the future of sports and how you experience sports. Personally, I'll always take an IRL race over a sim race, but and I don't think that's like that that hot of a take. But at the same time, there's a video called F1 on Apple Vision Pro, and I'll put a couple clips of it right here. And there's guys that made this total concept video. It was like a fake video, but they made it look real, where they put on an Apple Vision Pro and they could see all of the race cars going around the track. And then if you look, because there's eye tracking, if you look at a certain car, it will show all of their statistics pop up right above the car. And you can like have this view where if you want to like zoom in, or if you tap on a car, it will pull up the driver's view and things like that. That's so much more.
That's cool.
Yeah, so much more immersive than just like being able to watch it from your TV. Or even if you had like, I know F1 has like a view where you can see all the different racers' feeds at the same time, and you can have a huge visual of all of that. To have it be that custom made for you, I think of drone racing. Well, long story short, with the F1 thing, it was such a popular video that I believe they're actually doing it for F1 this next season. And they're actually getting it created for Apple Vision Pro, which I don't own an Apple Vision Pro, and I haven't had a reason big enough to get an Apple Vision Pro, and that is almost, if that was for drone racing, I would get one.
Right?
I absolutely would. No execs from Apple are ever going to watch this video, but if they do, I will buy your product if this app is made. And I think in my mind, the metaverse stuff is prerequisite, or at the very least, like a version of something like that like this really gets me excited. The
right.
Apple Vision Pro, where I can like literally pretend like I'm in the rafters in the stadium watching all these drones go, and it can tell me exactly like the person's name or the pilot's name right above their drone, and I can exactly see who's in first and how closely they got around this gate, and I can like zoom in and see, like that's the stuff that I think when I read through Infinite Reality's webpage and where their direction that they could potentially be taking drone racing, that really, really excites me. And so hopefully we get to see more of stuff like that in the future, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, it would be really interesting to see, especially as Apple Vision Pro continues to progress, exactly like that come to drone racing would totally transform the experience. And I think that would even leak over to like legacy TV and social media of how they're doing that stuff. You know, some of the breakthroughs they make in how they're presenting and producing the race for like immersive video, I think would improve all the other forms in a way that maybe we almost can't wrap our heads around now, because right, there's only so many ideas you can come up with unless you innovate into a totally different space. And I'm excited to see what Infinite Reality does with that. And I just hope Infinite Reality doesn't die and DRL doesn't become like one of Google's thousands of programs.
Yeah. The failed programs of Google.
Yeah.
So they have a bit more budget for this race coming up in February, which is super exciting. But as of right now, they have not announced a 2025 season. It's just a single race. Mm-hmm. Obviously, even if you did know some information, you couldn't tell us right now. But do you think that this is just a teaser to maybe get more investment, or this is potentially race one of a season that is yet to be announced? Or what does 2025 hold for us, do you think, in DRL?
Yeah. I'll say as much as I can without getting in trouble. I think
so. He does know. This is okay. All right, keep going.
I think for 2025, the future is bright for DRL. This will probably be one of many. We'll see what that looks like. I think it's definitely a proof of concept to Infinite Reality. Obviously, Infinite Reality has seen what DRL can do, but having DRL do it again under Infinite Reality's umbrella, I think it's a little bit of a proof of concept. and just showing them, they're like, hey, yeah, we're still the DRL we can still do this. And yeah, we'll see what format they choose. I mean, there's a plethora of formats that DRL could choose. I hope it's a season. It might not be. We'll see.
Well, Simon, I really appreciate your time. You're an absolute legend behind the scenes of drone racing. I'm excited that you're getting to go in February and on. I mean, you'll continue to be in the industry, and I know you do a lot of flying as well. If anybody wanted to see some of your stuff, where could they find you? Where could they reach out or anything like that?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram or YouTube are the two main ones, Simon.Saucy on Instagram and Simon Saucy on YouTube. And that is my real last name. It's not just a pilot name.
Not going to lie, that's like, I'm a little jealous. But anyway, either way, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Is there anything that I forgot to ask, or is there anything that you would have asked? Well, this interview's over, but I have more content coming out just like this very soon. If you're passionate about the drone industry and want to take a deeper dive, join my Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll get exclusive access to behind-the-scenes content, early access to interviews, and even a chance to have your questions featured on an upcoming episode with some of the top professionals in the drone world. Your support helps keep these conversations going and ensures that I can bring more of the insights that you want to hear directly from the people shaping the future of drones. So if you've got a burning question for the next guest or just want to be a part of the community, head on over to my Patreon. The link is down in the description. Your involvement makes all the difference. But that's all we have for you today. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, Jordan Kyle, signing off.